Good evening, everyone. It is 6:30 p.m. I will call the Tuesday, May 7th meeting of the Superior Common Council to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councillor Ledeen. Here. Councillor Van Sickle.
Councillor Van Sickle.
Here. Councillor Moffett.
Here.
Councillor Sweeney. Here. Councillor Fennessy.
Here.
Councillor Elm. Absent. Vice President Ludwig. Here. Councillor Herrick. Here. Councillor Johnson. Here. And President Grasky.
We have a quorum.
Item 4.1 is the approval of the April 16th, 2024 regular council meeting minutes.
The motion is by Councillor Herrick, second by Councillor Johnson. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
And item 6.1 is a report from Mayor Payne.
Hey, good evening again, councillors. Before I get to my business here, just a couple minor things. We're only about a month out from truly starting the budget process, but I'm going to have some probably preliminary questions for you. I don't know when or how I'll raise them, but before we get into priorities-based budgeting, we'll need some structural direction. I've got some recommendations, but Director Reinhardt and I have been talking about the overall status of our fiscal health. As I've explained before, it's good, but that leads us to a couple of clear choices that we have to make, particularly in the general fund. Namely, revenue is increasing, and so we have some choices where, we are in a position to start meaningfully reducing the property tax rate, but we're already among the lowest in Wisconsin, I think. That's what we've been told. That's what we think from the numbers we've seen so far. I'd like to confirm that, but we have a fairly low mill rate among Wisconsin cities. So we could keep reducing that the way we have been, taking in a bunch of revenue to the general fund, or we can keep using all the revenue we have in there and investing more in city services, the kind of day-to-day stuff that really starts making a difference. That usually means new staff. Or we can, and this may be our recommendation, start working to remove terminal tax revenue from the general fund. As you'll remember, last year we did that. That's a tough choice. On the one hand, it provides some long-term security. The general fund isn't reliant on it. We have no reason to believe it will go anywhere, that we won't, that we can't just rely on it and meet those other two goals I just expressed. But while it does create a challenge to the general fund to try and do that, to capture all new revenue for that only purpose, that means we'll be pretty limited in what we can do in the general fund for the next couple of years, so no new staff positions. But it really starts expanding our capital budget if we do that, maybe permanently, and maybe that continues to grow pretty dramatically in the years to come. So throwing that out there, as you meet with me in our regular meetings, or if you're really concerned about the budget, ask me about that in the next couple weeks and we'll have a more formal discussion. But I wanted you to start having those concepts on your brain, because we'll need to decide one of those directions before we go into priorities-based budgeting, because whichever of those we decide is going to have pretty serious budgetary implications as we build it throughout the summer. Any questions on that? I know it's very early, but... The other, our consultant theater projects related to the Princess Theater and All Things Theater is coming to town at the end of the month. We don't have to decide anything today, but I wanted to let you know that. We had a very long discussion with them at our last meeting. That's not really that conducive to a city council meeting. So I'll probably offer something like a voluntary special meeting towards the end of the month. We'll formally set that at the next meeting, but we'd probably do something like notice it, hold it as a public meeting where we would sit and have discussion like a formal meeting. But, if folks can't make it and we don't have a quorum, we're not going to decide anything in that meeting. It will be an open discussion with theater projects so they can get some of that feedback and discussion they were really looking for the last time they were here. But again, we won't set that till the next meeting. And then finally, you see my one item of business here. I know this may come as a bit of a surprise, but we had to move somewhat quickly late last week on a decision that I had been thinking about for a while now, to formally intervene in Superior Water, Light, and Power's most recent rate case. As I'm sure you know, most years, or many years, they they file to increase rates. I think the city, I think you have some specific grievances with this rate case. It has some direct implications for the city of Superior. We put a lot of time and effort into negotiating or protecting ourselves from liability and ensuring they had liability for a very significant environmental cleanup. They are now trying to pass those costs on to customers, and which had I known that would have very seriously changed our negotiations in that. But also, the city is one of the largest customers of Superior Water, Light, and Power. This rate increase, we think, will cost us over $50,000 a year, every year, and that's if they never raise rates again. And finally, the public's just not meaningfully represented in these conversations. We can make public comment, but this is decided down in Madison. It's a formal hearing, and we've never done this before, but these costs have very serious implications for our citizens, many of whom simply cannot afford them. These are very large rate increases, and I can't promise we're going to I don't know how effective we're going to be. I think we can be pretty effective. The city attorney's office has been doing a great job learning about this process really rapidly. But the most important thing is this would give us an opportunity to, of course, learn the process, maybe make a meaningful difference, negotiate with some real strength with the PSC and the utility, and arm us to do this in the future and make sure we are considered and our citizens' interests are considered when rate increases are proposed. Before I entertain your questions, I will ask the clerk to introduce a resolution, and then I'll see if you are interested in a motion second, and then we can discuss this.
All right, item 6.2, Mayor Payne recommends approval of a resolution authorizing intervention with full party status in Superior Water, Light, and Power's rate case.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
The motion is by Councilor Ledeen, second by Councilor Moffett. Questions or discussion? Councilor Herrick.
Yeah, just one question, just for my clarification, full party status, what does that exactly mean?
That means that we are recognized as a party of significant interest to the rate case. We can participate in the hearing. We can offer evidence. We can offer arguments at the PSC hearing that will decide the actual rates. Do I have that correct?
All right, thank you.
Councilor Sweeney.
What is the position, if there is one, on the city, towns, villages, burgs, that association, and or the county association? Do they formally say we're for this or we're against it on a normal basis, or don't you?
Largely no, because this is a very local case. So this only applies to our local utility, Superior Water, Light, and Power. Any given utility pursues its own rate increases.
But don't they have a certain time frame they have to do that within the state statutes apply? So I'm just wondering, are other cities, towns, burgs, I don't think Superior Water Light would be alone in requesting an increase. I'm just wondering if there's any strength in numbers on that, or are we looking to go alone?
It's possible some of the nearby towns and villages, most of them, even very close towns and villages, are not part of the coverage of this utility. It is pretty localized in Superior. I don't know how many other towns, villages, or cities in Wisconsin contest their local rates. There is a citizens utility board that looks for, I think they look for particularly egregious cases and try to represent citizens. They've also intervened in this case. But as I'm not aware that the League of Wisconsin Municipalities or Counties Association has a position. I think this is largely local, and I think it's largely novel. I haven't seen a lot of other cities intervening. Have you?
I've learned in my conversations with the attorney for the Citizens Utility Board that more and more municipalities are starting to get involved in these rate increase petitions. I don't know what that means in terms of numbers.
Just one more question. Doesn't some locations outside the city, isn't Superior Water Light providing them some services? Layton, Nebagaman, some of those areas?
I'm sure they do. I just don't know their full range. Remember, there are three utilities, so
exactly.
I just don't anecdotally. I know that East Central Energy provides a lot of the electric, and most of them I think are on wells for water. And as far as natural gas, I think a lot of them are propane. So I have to believe they stretch beyond the city's true city limit,
That's
but I
my-
don't think it's very far.
Okay, I think they do, I don't know about the Bagaman or so on, they go out to some areas like that. They're not gigantic, but I think the Superior Water Light does furnish some inventory to those locations.
Councilor Van Sickle.
Thank you, Chair. I can't speak too much to electric or natural gas prices, but I will say that I left my notebook across the hall, so I'm going to do my best here to be accurate. So I did reach out to the Wisconsin League of Municipalities to ask about this, and they were really surprised to learn that we were the only city in the state that had a private water utility, and that's of course just one part of this rate increase. So just for context, Superior Water, Light, and Power is asking for an 18% increase in water rates. So just as a comparison, I'll use the city of Beloit. So every utility, water utility, has like a base rate that you pay just for the connection. So in Superior, it's $18.25. In the city of Beloit, it's $7. For fire protection, it's $4.50 in the city of Beloit, and it's about $13 here. And then you get charged a commodity fee on top of that. And then once you have those base fees, then you have your volume fees. So it's split up by 2,000, 6,000, 48,000, and the gallons are broken up into cubic feet. So almost 800 gallons of water is about 2.5 cubic feet. So in Beloit, it's $1.52 for a residential per cubic foot of water for as much residential use. In the city of Superior, it's $5.66 for the same amount of water. So the first increment is 2,000 gallons. So in the city of Superior, you pay $5.66 for the first 2,000 gallons, plus higher base rates. In the city of Beloit, they pay $1.52 for the first 2,000 gallons of water. So we are in the same category. We serve more than 4,000 customers. Superior Water, Light, and Power has about 10,000 water customers, but that service does not go beyond the city. So we are about 4 times higher in terms of just water utility charges, and it's not even close. There's a inquiry tool that the PSC uses to compare those rates. So ours are $5.66 per cubic foot, $5.09 per cubic foot. It's just not even close when it comes to the rates that we are paying with the required revenue margin that no other city is experiencing. The other notable point is that Beloit's rates, their current rates, are from 2017, which is from May of 2017, which is a full year before the refinery exploded. So it was actually quite a while ago, and they haven't increased their rates since.
Further discussion or questions? Councilor Johnson.
Just a couple questions. It makes sense that we would want to help support our residents and our, big and small businesses with such a large increase. Just a couple of questions. I noticed this is post-dated. Why is it dated May 2nd?
I have a corrected copy where it's approved for the 7th if it passes tonight, so I did notice that today.
The formal resolution, sounds like just the date that we wrote the resolution, but it would be dated correctly if it passes. It would be dated with today's date.
Okay, so you haven't filed anything
Yeah,
currently?
we filed a request to intervene. So that was required. The deadline for that was Friday. So we did file the request. This resolution, since we've never done this, we're not sure if we have the authority to do this without your support or not. So it seemed wise to have council support. And so in the event that this failed, we simply wouldn't intervene. So yeah, we filed our request to intervene. This authorizes the administration to proceed.
So do we know if, I guess my question then would be, if we don't have you didn't have the authority to intervene, not that I'm saying one way or the other, but then why are we doing the resolution if we don't know we can? Maybe that's a question for Frog.
I had a deadline, as the mayor indicated, of late last week to have something filed with the Public Service Commission. So I filed a request more or less as a placeholder,
Okay.
knowing that the mayor would be approaching you about this tonight. As he's indicated, with your approval, we go ahead. With your disapproval, we shut her down.
I guess
Don't do anything. There's no cost to file.
Sure.
There's no penalty for not showing up at hearings, anything like that.
That was my next line of questioning. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you mentioned evidence being presented. What evidence, I guess, are you planning to present, or what things have you thought of to present in this case?
I don't know, and what I do know, I'll largely decline to answer. That's that's a legal argument that we'd be preparing, so we'd want to prepare that with some level of confidentiality. I don't know that we would present evidence per se. A formal intervener can present evidence, though, and as opposed to in public comment where you're just issuing a public comment. Like I said, our case is primarily twofold. Obviously, we want to make a strong general case on behalf of our residents, but we're intervening as a large customer as well. The city of Superior has an almost $1 million utility bill every year, and so that's common enough. Enbridge is the largest customer. They also filed as an intervener, and so we'll represent our actual true city costs. But then also, I likely want to talk quite a bit about the site of the manufactured gas plant and that liability, and so that would involve quite a bit of presentation and documents from our discussions and negotiations with them. But I don't know that full story yet. This process has just begun.
Thank you.
Further discussion or questions? Councilor Fennessy.
So are we representing, are we filing to intervene on behalf of the city and our utility bill that we pay, or are we filing to represent the individual citizens of Superior and the utility bill that they pay?
Both. And so when you file a request to intervene, you basically make the case that you are an interested party, that you are affected by this rate case. And so our obviously strongest argument is that we're a very large customer. Theoretically, you as a customer could intervene as well if you wanted to go down and argue. I don't know that they would let that many customers, but so we are intervening as a large customer, but we well and truly do represent citizens in Superior, and I think can legitimately make that case as well. But we'll hear whether they accept that request or not. Okay. Councilor Moffett. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. I just wanted to thank you for intervening in this. I know that utility costs are a big deal for all of our residents, and I think that there's been a lot of challenges with our utility situation lately. I've been doing a lot of research into this as well, and I think it's really important that you're doing this work on behalf of our community, and I fully support it.
Obviously, my first concern and priority here is regular residents and citizens, but it's important. We said it in the resolution, but it's important for me to say now too that local, especially small businesses, are pretty heavily impacted by this. This is a big bill. This will really increase people's bills, and obviously it's tough for any household, especially folks on fixed incomes or folks living at or near poverty levels, folks already struggling to pay rent. I have personally seen high utility bills drive folks into homelessness. That is true. That happens frequently in lower income communities, and it's happened here. But this can close businesses. It can, and it does. It can close the very largest of businesses, as we saw in northern Minnesota, and it can be one of those final straws for a small business too. So I just wanted to make sure that that we said that they may not have the resource to intervene. I hope to be speaking on their behalf as well. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the resolution. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. The motion carries. Thank you, councilors.
Item 7.1 is the business of the Human Resources Committee with a meeting held on April 15th. Is there a report from the chair?
Yes, there is. Thank you. At our HRC April 15th meeting, we approved the job description and request to fill the assistant building permit technician position. The vacancy was due to employee transfer to a different department. We approved the request to fill the light equipment operator streets position, vacancy due to a resignation. We approved the request to fill the facilities, maintenance, and construction superintendent position after approving the job description at a prior HRC meeting. This is a new position proposed by Councilor Johnson during our 2023 budgeting process and became one of the top priorities during our 2024 budgeting process. We approved a new paid parental leave policy. As you read through the documentation included with your agenda packet, you've seen that the policy will allow current full-time employees who qualify for FMLA and who have successfully completed an initial probationary period with the city will be eligible for 6 weeks of paid parental leave upon the birth, adoption, or placement of a foster child in their home. The 3-page policy defines qualifications for and exclusions from the paid parental leave, proper use of the paid parental leave, procedure for applying for the leave, required documentation to properly account for the leave, 6-week work obligation upon returning after the paid leave, and consequences for violation of the paid parental leave policy. I want to thank Councilor Van Sickle for her efforts in working with various constituencies over the 8 months that it took for the policy to be developed, including our Human Resources Director, city employees, representatives of Local 27 and Local 74, and our City Health Insurance Committee. In developing the paid parental leave policy you see before you this evening for approval. And I will turn it back to you, Clerk, to read the recommendation.
All right. Recommendation 7.1.1 is to approve a new paid parental leave policy 13.02.
Now a second.
Motion is by Councilor Herrick, second by Councilor Ludwig. Discussion. Councilor Johnson.
I just want to say thank you to those on the Human Resources Committee that have worked on this, specifically Councilor Van Sickle. Thank you for doing that work. Specifically, I'd like to highlight the birthing parent is eligible up to 6-week parental leave following a stillbirth or pregnancy loss. I just want to highlight that that's an important piece that often is missed, so thank you.
Councilor Ludwig, did you have anything else?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
For Councilor Sweeney.
I'm on that committee, but I was not there, okay? And so my comments would have taken place there. But when I read through that the other day, the only one that I have questioned about is foster children. It's my understanding, but I'm not positive because I haven't had a chance to check on this totally, that if you take foster children, either the county or the state pays you to take foster children. So while one might say it's nowhere adequate to what they give, but there's still money change, I believe. I'm not positive. I would like somebody to check that out before we include the foster. I realize there are probably different segments of foster children, but if what I said is true, then I think at least I would have a problem giving a foster mother or father, if that's the proper term, paid time off, when they're already receiving some form of compensation for being a foster parent. Now, again, I could be wrong about that. I don't know how critical it is to pass this tonight, but I would just like somebody to check that out before we move ahead with this. If there's someone else that knows more than then I'm more than happy to listen to them and hear. And I admit that I could be wrong about this. Okay?
Councilor Van Sickle, can you speak to foster children or Director Janigo?
I would just thank you for that comment, Councillor Sweeney. And I did just want to refocus the issue. I think that in some situations what you're saying is true in order to offset or support that home environment and all of the things new parents need. But I think and something important to note is that whether that person is getting support from a government entity, all employees that are on parental leave for any of the described situations are always in a paid status. They're already in a paid status. So what we are offering is not to pay them when they otherwise wouldn't have been. It's really about reducing the burden on those families to accrue, bank, and fully expend that paid time off. So I hear your point, but I don't know if it's related to this policy. Does that make sense?
So I left that. Excuse me. Well, there are some foster parents that takes a foster child in, and then they go ahead and adopt them. I've heard of that. Okay, I know that happens. Okay, that I don't have. I'm just saying, if you're taking a foster child, 1, 2, or 3, and whoever places them with you, and I believe it's the county, but I don't know that for a fact, or the state, they're paying them. Okay, there's money exchanging hands. That's a business then. Okay, call it what you want, but there's still money. They're producing income for themselves, whether they're covering their expenses. I don't know any of that. I'm just saying there must be some form of a contract there between the foster parent and the county or the state, whoever it is. And that's where I have a problem with. The first two, adoption or childbirth, I have absolutely no problem with at all. I'm just talking about the foster. I think we need a clarification on that, okay? And if there's more than one type of foster, that's fine. But I just think we need a clarification on that.
So, Counselor, I can at least answer the question. Yes, the policy very clearly covers the placement of a foster child. And in terms of options, typically there's not a lot of urgency behind a human resources policy, an employee policy. And this policy is not in place right now, so it's debatable, and you should debate whether there's urgency tonight, except I would say there are parents or soon-to-be parents in the city right now that would be impacted by a delay. They would not lose, there's no benefit to lose right now, but you know, we've been discussing this fairly publicly, and I think some folks have been very hopeful for it to pass. That's the strongest I think I can put that. So that's all I can speak to any kind of urgency.
Excuse me.
Please.
I'm not saying we should delete the whole policy. I'm saying maybe we take that piece of it out, okay?
That would be in order if you wanted to amend that line.
I will make that amendment to take the foster child portion out of the document for further research, and I'm sure they could come back next month. It wouldn't take much, I don't think, to clarify that. So that's my motion.
There's a motion to amend by removing the phrase or placement of a foster child in the first sentence of the policy and all subsequent references to foster children. Is there a second to that motion? Second is by Councillor Fennessy. Discussion on the motion to amend.
I don't know if Director Janigo's on there, but should that go back to committee or just back to the floor? We can clarify as well. There's another piece that the clock would start on that placement date, so that's another piece that we can clarify with that as well.
And in terms of the effect, yes, if the amendment passes and then the policy passes, what we would do is if the Human Resource Committee members are interested, we would agendize the entire policy, so it would be in effect, but subject to a future amendment. Councillor Herrick.
Yeah, kind of going back just a little bit before this, what just took place, my question was in regards to foster children, are we looking at foster infants? I mean, because we're kind of looking at this policy for for those who just had babies. So are we looking at foster, infants so that they have the opportunity to bond with their new parents? Or is it foster children in general?
It says foster child, so I think that's going to be in general. It does not say infants or specified
Doesn't
age.
matter what age?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Moffett, do you want to speak to the amendment, Councilor?
Yes, please. I wanted to speak against the amendment. The children that are in foster care are likely the children most in need in our community of a loving household, and they're in many times coming out of a drug situation in our community. I believe greater than 90% of the foster care situations in our community are drug related and things like that. These children have been through traumatic experiences. We have a shortfall of people who are willing to be foster parents in our community. There are children in need where their needs are not being met. Those payments that come in to assist with foster care are meant to cover the costs of having the child, clothing and transportation, and if you run out of sick days because you are home with a sick kid and things like that. And so they're not meant to be income. They're to cover the expenses that you bear by doing something wonderful for our community and caring for a child that is deeply in need. And so I don't care if it's an infant or a 12-year-old who's just been through a traumatic experience and has been separated from their parent. If somebody else in our community is willing to step up and be a temporary help for them and provide a loving household, I think this is the least we can do, especially considering that they're really not getting paid to do this. It's just meant to cover their expenses.
The question is whether to amend. Further discussion. So, Director Janico.
All right. I apologize for jumping in late. I agree with everything that Councilor Moffett just said regarding the pay that foster parents do receive, and to answer Councilor Sweeney's question, I do believe they are paid for taking in foster children, but it is for their care. And I think the proposal that the policy that's before the council tonight for approval has to do with the ability to stay home and bond with these kids, which is the same as if you adopted or birthed your own child. All three of those things are equally eligible for the Family Medical Leave Act. That is why that is also part of the qualifications for the paid family leave or the paid parental leave. I apologize. So I don't know that the fact that a person is paid to foster a child or given money to support that child is the same thing as what this policy is providing.
Councilor Fennessy.
In addition to, Councilor Herrick's question about, the age, I think the other thing that we should be, at least why I wanted to go back to committee is to answer some of these questions, including there's some situations where you could get a new foster kid every 30 days. It could be a 30-day placement, and so the way that I'm understanding this is we would give 6 weeks of leave for every time a new foster kid gets placed, and I don't think that's the spirit of this either. I totally agree with what Councilor Moffat's saying, and but I think we at least need to send this section back to kind of have some of these conversations, because I don't think that's the idea for this at all. Is for some of these, you can have respite foster care where you get a foster kid over the weekend. You could do a temporary foster care where it's 30 days. You could do foster care and you end up having the kid for 4 or 5 years. But I think we need to probably tighten up some of this language just we're, at least for that part. I don't have any issue with the other parts, but for that part, it just kind of, there's a lot of different scenarios that could qualify as being a foster parent that I think need to be talked through.
I'd like to try and get answers to at least, I heard 2 questions, or that generated 2 questions that I can ask. the first, and Director Janigo, could you try and answer these for me? First, if a person can a person take paid parental leave under this policy for longer than they have a foster child in their care, or do we just not know that?
Maybe a different way to respond to that is every employee is limited to 6 weeks of paid parental leave in a calendar year, regardless of how many kids they foster over throughout that year. They will not get 6 weeks for every single child. So they are limited to a total of 6 weeks in a calendar year. I don't know if that answers it.
That would have been my second question, but so do we just not, a person would obviously submit to us some proof that they have had a foster child placed with them, but we may or may not know if and when that person returns to their parent or a different foster home.
All I can say is I believe that there is paperwork, that there's the paper trail regarding those placements.
Okay. Counselor Fennessy.
Yeah, to follow up on that, I'm not seeing in the policy where it says that they can only use that once. It just says that the city superior will provide 6 weeks of paid parental leave to employees to use within 8 weeks following the birth or adoption of a child. I don't, unless it's further in the document, I don't see where it says once per calendar year, once every 12 months.
No, it's 6 weeks max. So they could take 1 day, 14 times 6. They could take.
It's line 1.
It's line 1 of under use of paid parental leave.
Line 1.
Yes, under use of paid parental leave.
Up to 6 weeks.
Right, up to 6 weeks of birth, adoption, child placement of a foster child. It doesn't say within every 12 months.
It does. It says each calendar year.
Page 2?
Page 2 of that, if you're looking at the draft, HRC, policy and procedures, is page 2 at the very top.
Once per calendar year. Okay, perfect. No, thank you. That's what I was missing.
Councilor Van Sickle.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for their questions, because they're really important. And this is not a policy that you can just adopt from other communities whole cloth. There's no template for this. So in response to the question about emergency placement, it's a really good question because that came up. And the cure to that is I don't like to say application, but the application part, where the policy requires the employee to apply for this paid status with Human Resources. There's also a piece here where their supervisor signs off. And that's just to make sure that that department, those employees have a plan in place, whether it's overtime or, just getting everybody's ducks in a row. So if there was an emergency placement, an emergency status with a child or a parent, or something to that, sorry, that would not apply here. If there was an emergency placement or somebody that was frequently fostering, bless their heart, they could not access this for. They couldn't access parental leave if they were doing that very important work, like respite care, wouldn't be covered under this policy. Now, Director Janigo did mention when you have a permanent placement of a child in foster care, that's typically, same with adoption, a long process, years, months. So making sure that there are parameters to notify HR, your supervisor. It's not really in response to emergency situations. And if somebody did have an emergency situation, they could utilize FMLA like in any other situation that they might now. And I think to the counselor's points, I don't know if 6 weeks is enough of a carrot to do that work, and I don't know if the payment is enough to do that work. But this is really designed to be a as planned an event as possible, which I think is probably going to be the norm for our city employees. Thank you.
Counselor Grasky.
I have a question. This would be a choice by said employee to use this time in order to, I guess, take care of any child or from foster to actually birthing. Am I right on that one? Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
The question again is on the amendment. Is there any further discussion on the amendment to remove foster care from the policy, placement of a foster child from the policy? Counselor Sweeney?
My purpose in bringing this to light was to create good policy, okay? That's what we have to do. We're here to create good policy, not to create just simply policy. And in my mind, this should go back and at least be looked at. And if everything is as some people understand it to be here, or it's something that I understand it to be, if they're opposite, then we should correct it. If I'm totally wrong, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying, if we're going to create good policy, we should go back and take a look at this portion of it. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to amend. Counselor Johnson.
I just want to come back to something that I heard. So if somebody were, because oftentimes because foster care parents are so hard to find, they become the go-to people in our community. So am I hearing here that the folks that would be our go-tos, they can still, it's clear that they can only use this 6 weeks once per calendar year, but then it says that they can only use it in the first 8 weeks. So let's say, for example, my family fostered a child in January, at the start of the calendar year, and I was able to use 2 weeks of that time. And then in December, I had another foster child come into my home, followed the proper procedures. Would I still be eligible for that benefit, or
My read of the policy is no, but I could be wrong, and Director Janigo should correct me if I'm wrong, please, because that line is pretty black and white that an employee is eligible for paid parental leave once each calendar year. Use 1 day, use 6 weeks, it's over.
Okay.
Is that correct, Director Janigo?
Sorry. I think that's a good question, and what the policy says is that they're eligible for parental leave once each calendar year, and what the intent is placement of one or more child at one time.
Okay.
So that is the intention of the policy. The same would be true if somebody were to have more than one child in a calendar year. Then they still would only be eligible for the leave for one child for 6 weeks. So yes, I would believe you would be correct.
Okay. Is that something we can just do tonight then to make that clear, or is that something that we need to send back? I guess that makes sense when I say it out loud, and I kind of follow through that. So I guess I'm just trying to think through that in my head on how that works. And again, I missed the meeting as well as an alternate on that, so I apologize for asking these questions kind of last minute here.
But I can help you with the process. The question in front of us is whether to remove the placement of foster child from this policy altogether. So if the amendment passes and then the policy passes, children, the birth or adoption of employee's child would be covered, but an employee taking on a foster child would not. Now, these other questions that you have raised may be good questions, but I don't believe they're answered by the amendment either way, and would either require a new amendment afterwards to clarify them, or yeah, they would require further amendments. I mean, to me, it's clear enough. Director Janigo expressed the policy. Any given policy can always get clarity later if it really is well and truly muddy. But that's up to you. So I know I didn't really answer your question, but as far as the amendment goes, it only governs whether or not foster children are covered. Okay, the question again is on the amendment. Any further discussion on whether to amend?
We have a roll call, please.
Of course. No further discussion. We will. The question is whether to amend the policy, the motion and the policy, to remove from the first sentence of the policy the phrase "or placement of a foster child" and all subsequent references to foster children. Councillor Herrick?
Do we want to add to that to refer that part back to committee? Or are we just going to drop it off?
I thought about that a little bit. I don't believe there is a parliamentary way to refer just this isolated motion, but it can. If the policy passes, you can always agendize it. If it doesn't, it can also go back to committee. So it can still be handled in committee either way. But
all right. Thanks.
So the question again is whether to amend by removing the phrase "or placement of a foster child." We will proceed by roll call.
Councillor Johnson. No. Grasky. No. Ledeen. No. Van Sickle. No. Moffett.
No.
Sweeney. Yes. Fennessy. Yes. Ludwig. No. Herrick.
Councillor Johnson voted, right? Okay. That is 7 against, 2 in favor. The motion to amend fails. The question is on the main motion, whether to adopt the entire policy as written. Further discussion. We didn't get far, so you all still have privilege. Councillor Johnson.
I meant to reach out to Councillor Van Sickle, and I apologize for not getting to you sooner. Can I ask the difference between FMLA and you did send me this before, so thank you for that, and I did look through it. The difference between FMLA and our policy is 6 weeks, but the amount of time that we're allowing employees to take this is within the first 8 weeks. Can you walk me through, or can we have some discussion about where the difference between that is, and why not just expanding that into the full 12 weeks?
Councillor Van Sickle, are you willing to answer that?
Yes, it's a good question that has come up, and I appreciate that. So the problem we're trying to solve is not that employees aren't being paid while they're on parental leave. It's that they're cashing in their earned time off in order to be paid, because family medical leave is intended to have, you don't have to expend all 12 weeks at once when you have a family emergency. You can take 2 weeks here, 4 weeks there to care for your family. So that was passed in the 90s, I want to say 1993, the Federal Medical Leave Act, essentially said employees can take this many unpaid days off without consequences. So it just created this block of time that you could be out of work without consequences, unpaid. So that's FMLA. Then several years before that, Wisconsin passed its own policy, the Wisconsin Family Medical Leave Act, I want to say in 1989. And they have a provision in there that says employees have the right to take the 2 weeks of unpaid time off during that 2 weeks of unpaid time off. So we couldn't exclude that from the language. So what it offers is two pathways for employees to apply for time off. So when the goal is to preserve as much of their banked time, sick, vacation, PTO, we were trying to close that gap, that 12 weeks. So you saw, I think in your packet, communities have adopted split policies, some that are 2 weeks, some that are 4 weeks, some that are 6 weeks, or 240 hours is an important distinction here. So if an employee wanted their parental leave in this policy to start on the day the child is born, placed in their home, they could do that. They could start the 6 weeks right away. And then once that 6 weeks is up, it is then their responsibility to have the next 6 weeks banked up and expended. So with 6 weeks, we meet them halfway. 8 weeks is in there to build some flexibility, and we were able to carve up that second chunk a little bit. So the two pathways are essentially you can interrupt your state benefit, because if you go into an unpaid status, that changes your benefits. But you would be able to preserve more of your bank time. So you could go 2 weeks in an unpaid status, 6 weeks of the parental leave, and then just 4 weeks on the back end of your banked time. So that was the madness behind having that 8-week buffer is to offer the employee some choice. So if you really only had 4 weeks, you could kind of tailor the leave in that application to Human Resources 60, 30, 90 days in advance. So you could choose that. So I think we recognize that there is very little risk in losing an employee by offering this in terms of them just leaving. Maybe they couldn't find childcare or something, because the policy does direct that they would owe us 6 weeks of work after that. So that feels more attainable. If we went to 6, 8, 9, 12 weeks, the problem that we run into is if we try to recoup that on the back end, that could actually end up hurting that employee for months down the road if we had to try to recoup those wages. And the city also would be paying their health insurance and their benefits the entire time. The other difference when you start to see policies more than 6 weeks is that it's usually a state mandated program where every employee in the state is paying into something like a supplemental insurance that collectively covers 3 months of parental time. So it feels like a good. It feels like a good start to introduce parental leave for as many employees as we have, and just based on the feedback I got from the employees, the 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks made sense for this demographic of employees.
That makes sense. I guess the only reason I would, and I'm not going to do it tonight. I could bring it up in Human Resources. We can look at this. The only reason I asked that question would be from the father's perspective. So let's say, for example, my wife or my partner is taking time, the first 6 weeks off, and I maybe take the first 2 weeks with the child and the mother, and then I go back to work for 4 weeks or 5 weeks. It seems to make sense to expand that maybe to the full 12 weeks to be able to take that 6 weeks, so that we could, so I could take the time off later. But I think that's a discussion for another time, and I feel like this is a solid policy. So thank you for answering that.
Councillor Johnson makes a good point that I forgot to make a moment ago. Obviously, amendments to this policy are in order. We will entertain them. But if a policy is adopted, it is, of course, possible to also bring it to Human Resources right away. We do that all the time, most of the time after some delay to see the effect of a policy after a little while. But if folks want to pass, if they feel any urgency to pass, you can pass it tonight and immediately refer the same policy back to the Human Resource Committee so it can be adopted and also then immediately considered. So your question earlier, Councillor Johnson, well, an amendment, I think that was your question, an amendment cannot be referred. The whole policy can, even after it's passed. So you can automatically put it on agenda.
One more thing. We talked a little bit about going after an employee for lost wages if they fail to fulfill their end of the agreement afterwards. Is there some leeway on the city's part in pursuing those damages if they didn't fulfill it? For example, if, let's say, something terrible happened during that 6 weeks time, the parent decided, I'm not able to come back to work at all, but they had taken some of that time anyway. Does the city have some leeway in pursuing damages, or is this an automatic?
So I'm going to very deliberately not ask Director Janigo to answer that question because I have a position on it, and that's we absolutely have that leeway. Policies should be followed in almost all cases, but in almost all cases, all the way up into including laws, we have plenty of discretion. Police officers decide whether or not to enforce a law every single day. So yes, we always take into account extenuating circumstances. We defer to policy most of the time. But of course, I have a very strong position that we can decline to enforce a policy if it's in the interests of the city or an employee. Any further discussion on the main motion? Councillor Sweeney. I'm sorry, Councillor Grasky has privilege.
I just wanted to point out, and just from the type of, I don't know, I'm not a mother. I've never had a PTO in my life, and honestly, this is just a very interesting, fluid, informational piece. But what really struck me was, of course, just kind of claiming around the fact that it feels like a good start. I think that when I look at some of the things that we struggle as a city is absolute retention and trying to retain employees and trying to understand that today's demographic of where someone would choose to work, these kind of things need to start being approached and applied. I mean, if you look at one stat here from 2014, public safety employees have doubled up to almost 30% in both Local 27 and Local 74. I mean, that's a complete reflection of how fast this it's not trend necessarily. I think it's just a reflection of where our community is going. So if it's hard to understand about money this way or that way, I think it's also about the idea of obtaining really good employees and honoring those employees, which I can sympathize with that and understand that part of this. So always keep that in mind too.
Councillor Sweeney.
If birth triggers the date that the leave starts, that's correct, right? What triggers the date for an adoption?
The date of placement.
I'm sorry?
The actual date of placement.
She said the actual day of placement.
Of placement. Okay. I don't know if it says that there, but if that's what it is, that's what it is. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to approve.
Can I just have a second? Because if that's not in there, it has to be in there. So just bear with me.
It is in there.
It does say placement of a foster child, but is there a more official term, like, I thought, like, date of placement? Is that different than placement of a foster child?
No, I don't. I think that's very clear. Use of paid parental leave for adoption or foster care cannot take place prior to physical placement of the child with the parent. That's even stronger language because it protects the flexibility that you mentioned before.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Can I just say a couple things?
Please.
Thank you. I just want to thank the employees of the city. I've never done a policy like this before where it was built so internally. So that was a new experience. I think, as many of you probably know, the legislature has restrictions on policy like this. So, this is not something that we can apply broadly to our community. Just keeping an eye on regional policy and finding ways that we can be competitive. And this policy really was from employees and drafted and amended, revised many a time over these months. And I got to spend a lot of time one-on-one with employees and their families and their babies. And I, over and over, they would describe these extraordinary situations pretty casually, whether it was, there are stories. Lee Sandock Baker offered some, having a baby about 10 years ago. Captain Susie Olson has many stories. I hope that if you are feeling, you're the bravest woman I know, you might share with us why this is important. But that pumping in a fire truck when you've been on scene for 6 hours, it's really extraordinary. And, I don't, starting to hear things like rationing their sick time, or, what parent needs less sick time, particularly when you have multiple kids at home, or the many parents that work for the city who, might have the ability to trade shifts and make it work while responding to emergencies. So we tried to build from best practices. So there's full gender parity here. So if both parents work for the city, they both get 6 weeks. And that's different from now because they would need to share the 12 weeks, but they can't share earned time off. So in that case, both parents would get the full 6 weeks or 240 hours. And, they talked a lot to me about, pregnancy being such a physical event, and then putting all your gear back on, an emotional experience. And I just want to thank Chief Volbrecht and Chief Winterscheidt, who sat down with me and really described what they would like to see be proposed and be passed. This has just been incredible over what was something of a tough winter. This carried me with a lot of light, and I just super appreciate being able to come to your swearing-in ceremony and just spend time with you and learn more about what you do. It is extraordinary, and I've been saying for 2 months now that Captain Olson said it best. You're asking for 6 weeks in exchange for 30 years. So I couldn't be more proud to introduce this policy and pass it with this council. So thank you.
Any further discussion? Question is on adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion carries. Thank you, councilors.
Item 7.5 is the business of the Public Safety Committee, with meetings held on April 18th and a special meeting held on May 1st. Is there a report from the chair?
No report from the chair, but let the record reflect there was no special May 1st meeting of the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 8.1.1 is the business of the Plan Commission, with a meeting held on April 17th. Is there a report from the chair?
Yes, this was a short meeting for most of us. You see our recommendations for 2 more small business grants, and those were approved unanimously, so I will recommend those to you. But I just wanted to give special mention to we had special guests in the form of a UMD class on, I want to say, planning, zoning, urban development, something like that, packed the room to just watch our business. It was our shortest plan commission meeting in months. And I felt bad. And I stayed long and spoke with those students for a while. So 2 things. One, that our plan commission counselors, Fennessy, Grasky, and Moffitt, you all made a terrible mistake in leaving. Those kids were great. And 2, especially chairs of committees, but committee members, this happens to you, and students come to your meeting, I would strongly encourage you, linger, talk to them about business of government. It's easy to think of plan commission as kind of boring. We all know it's the most exciting thing in your lives, but it is very interesting, very important. So I just wanted to thank those students for coming and encourage counselors to continue. I know you do a great job, but to continue welcoming students into our committees. If you'd please read our recommendations.
Item 8.1.1 is to approve the Duluth Best Bread Grant application.
Motions by Counselor Johnson, second by Counselor Fennessy. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion carries.
8.1.1.2 is to approve the Superior Guns and Ammo Grant application.
Motions by Counselor Fennessy, second by Counselor Grasky. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion carries.
Item 8.1.2 is the business of the Urban Forestry Tree Board with a meeting held on April 18th. Is there a report from the chair?
Yes, there is. Thank you. My first 3 items, I'm just going to take a little liberty just to report. This year marks the official recognition of our city as a Tree City USA. So we've been a Tree City USA for 25 years. So I believe that's quite a good thing to strive for. Even though it was a rainy day, on Arbor Day, April 26th, over 30 volunteers showed up to remove buckthorn, which of course we know is an invasive species, along the Millennial Trail. And this was one of our Tree City USA scheduled events for the year. Our yearly tree order was delivered, and our Parks and Rec and Forestry crews started planting trees for the season, starting with our first tribute tree ceremony held on April 24th in Central Park, dedicated to fallen workers. At our April 18th meeting, the Urban Forestry Tree Board, we approved changes to our tribute tree program application to make it more efficient for our staff. Currently, staff have to call all tribute tree contributors to see whether or not they want to participate in our annual tribute tree ceremonies. And now we've included this option as a checkoff item on our application. And just a note here, this year's tribute tree ceremonies will be held on June 4th. We approved the updated list of recommended trees for boulevard plantings, and the updated list will be posted on our Parks, Rec, and Forestry website. To stress the value and importance of preserving our urban forestry tree canopy, the board approved the tree root preservation and protection construction specifications, which will now be included in bid documents for construction projects. We also approved supporting an application to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Inflation Reduction Grant, and that is our action item for this evening. The grant would target removal of dead and dying ash trees on private property in specified areas in the north end of Superior. The parks crew estimates there are slightly over 350 private ash trees in the north end, and are proposing to use the funding, if we get the grant, to hire contractors to assist homeowners in removing these trees and replanting non-ash trees. City staff would focus on pruning boulevard trees and carrying out new plantings, while a flyer would be distributed to inform homeowners in the designated zone about the plan. So I will turn it back to you for reading of the resolution. Thank you.
Item 8.1.2.1 is a recommendation to approve a resolution supporting an application to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Inflation Reduction Grant.
Second.
Motion's by Counselor Grasky, second by Counselor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Moving on to reports without recommendations at this time, are there any further committee or commission reports to be made?
If you don't mind, I would just like to do a quick reminder that this Thursday is our Superior Creative Economic Summit. It is from 9 a.m. to 1:30. It is open to the public. Though that time is longer, kind of almost a full day, it'd be of value, I think, to stop by and see the hard work that SEPA, or Cultural Events and Public Art, have been working on, and where your public art dollars will be going as far as supplying the city and surrounding artists with funds to start creating beautiful things for our city. So I encourage you to stop by. All right, it's at the post office, the historic post office.
Any further committee reports? Thank you. We can move to new business.
Item 10.1, I am recommending approval of miscellaneous licenses.
Motion is by Counselor Herrick, second by Counselor Grasky. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 10.2, Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Director Kadat is requesting the approval of a resolution supporting the proclamation of World Migratory Bird Celebration Day in the city of Superior.
Motion is by Counselor Grasky, second by Counselor Ledeen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 10.3, Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Director Kadat is recommending the approval of an agreement for design and build services of a skate park located at Heritage Park. The budget is $300,000 and no cents for all services.
Motion is by Counselor Dean, second by Counselor Ludwig. Counselors, this would typically go through committee, but obviously it's fairly timely with the design and build schedule in the coming year. So I and the chair agreed it should come directly to council. Any discussion? Counselor Sweeney?
A couple of questions. First of all, the areas where we're going to build this new one is exactly where the old one was,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So has there been any thought that perhaps this isn't the best spot for that? As long as we're going to rebuild it, it sounds to me like they're going to rebuild. So have we at least thought that maybe this isn't the best place for that, not only from the skateboard people who use a skateboard, or from anyone else? And so I don't know if we've thought that maybe this is the best place in the city, but if we're going to do this, maybe there's some thought with UWS. I don't know if that building project is ever going to happen, but maybe there are some better areas that we can at least look at. And then my other question, do we notify the neighbors on this? Are they aware we're going to, it's there, I know that, but I just think it may be a courtesy to notify the neighbors that when they've got any input. I have had, it's not my area at all, okay, but I have had just 2 calls over the number of years, and it's the lights on at night that they seem to be bothered with. And so that's an easy fix, okay? But I don't know if we should, it would seem to me maybe we could reach out to them and just at least the courtesy of telling them in advance that we're planning on, if assuming that's where we're going to go.
This is an interesting contract, Counselor, that it's not novel. We've done them like this before, but it's design and build. So, no, we haven't really had conversations internally about moving it anywhere else. And I know I'm not strongly considering that. I don't think most of the committee members would either. But the design component of it does include public outreach, primarily to kids that, well, I got in trouble for saying kids before, but to folks that ride skateboards, that would use the skate park. Those would be our primary voices. We want weighing in on where it should be. We will hear if they strongly tell us, come on, you got it in the worst place in the city, that's something we should hear. And that could derail plans. The plan right now is to keep it at Heritage Park. And in terms of reaching out to the neighbors, we have started doing that with park projects, and we could conceivably build that into that design and outreach process. With Carl Gulo Park, did a pretty extensive outreach and included them. They largely chose their park and designed it.
recalling when that was built, whenever it was, I'm not sure, but they did reach out to the skaters, called them at that time, and they're the ones that made it a success because they put their time and effort and told us what they wanted, and we didn't. I would think that's been one of the more successful amusement or recreational areas in the city.
Yes, I believe strongly in both points that neighbors should design what their neighborhood looks like. That includes the parks in their neighborhood, but also parks are best when they're designed by the people that will use them, and that means skaters. Now, of course, you are not prohibited from using the skate park, Councilor Sweeney, but you're welcome to it. But you got to show up and help design it first.
Well, thanking you in advance.
Any further discussion? Director Kadat, did you have anything to add?
I just mentioned the only complaint that I've heard over the years is, as Councilor Sweeney mentioned, about the lights. And one of the things we discovered with our lighting assessment is that those lights weren't really intended for a skate park. And so we have an RFP out right now to do some lighting upgrade works at various locations. And one of them does include the skate park. So without, separate from the design build, we're going to be addressing that concern about the lights. And $300,000, although may seem like a lot of money for a new skate park, isn't a lot of money. So I think the reason we haven't considered a different location is because we intend to do a very careful, selective process on what pieces we'll be replacing and trying to reuse some of the slab and other materials to make that $300,000 go a little bit further. So as the mayor did mention, we're not looking at a new location, and the intent would be to keep it at that location.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the contract, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 10.4, Economic Development and Planning and Port Director Cirque is requesting the approval of a resolution approving the City of Superior's 3-year harbor development statement of intentions for the Wisconsin Harbor Assistance Program.
Motions by Councilor Herrick, second by Councilor Grasky. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
10.5, Economic Development, Planning, and Port Director Cirque recommends awarding the City of Superior Zoning Code update to SRF Consulting in the amount of $153,077.50.
Motions by Councilor Grasky, second by Councilor Fennessy. Is there discussion? Councilor Van Sickle?
Is this who did our comp plan?
Yes.
Okay. Just thanks to the commission. I think that this work will likely be the most transformative policy that we do in a couple decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Moffett.
I spent some time kind of digging through this. We didn't have the opportunity to really look through at the Plan Commission level, and I think that's unfortunate. I'm really excited that the consultant has experience already with our city, and that kind of does give them an advantage to kind of get a jump start on some of the research and things like that. And I'm also very excited that they have recruited a CNU accredited person to like help with some of the form-based code stuff, somebody that really specializes in that. But just kind of curious about, and these are questions I guess I would like to ask to the commission level, but about how we're going to go through the process. The consultant says that they'd like to work really closely with the Planning Commission, which I do hope is the goal, but I'd like to hear more about how that's going to work. And then also kind of curious about it mentions updating the code in many places and isn't real clear that we really need to just like replace code substantially. And then also there's parts that talk about the differences between the traditional zoning methods and form-based systems, and it leaves it kind of ambiguous on what sort of code we're looking for from these. And we all know that we need this code. This code is as old as most of us in the room, and it just doesn't really function in the way that we want it to. And so I want to make sure that we're asking for what we want to set our community up for the next few decades.
Sure. So I think I can answer most of that. The plan, when we did the comprehensive plan, SRF and the city put together a community group to design most of the comp plan, which was then reviewed and approved and recommended by Plan Commission before coming to council. In this case, zoning is much more land use. It's much more technical than that's the more detailed child of a comprehensive plan. I know you know this. I'm saying it for the benefit of everybody, but so the Plan Commission will function as that design committee, which leads me to my second point. Regardless of what advice the consultant does or does not give, of course we rely on them for professional advice, but the Plan Commission and ultimately the City Council writes and designs this code. They'll write it, but we will be designing it. So it's of course possible that they would present us something that we strongly disagree with. Well, then either us or them, more likely us, will have failed the process by that point, because we should be advising them. And as you know, Counselor, I agree. I think pretty much all of the code should be completely rewritten, and we should design a very modern 21st century form-based code, and that will be my opinion too. But we'll be doing that together as a commission. Further discussion, Councilor Grasky.
I just want to say I'm very thrilled to see someone stepping in and taking on this task. I think with a lot of things that we're facing in the next couple of years, this just will add to the momentum that I think we can prepare for when it comes to really having a thriving community, when things are going to kind of change things up. And so I just want to say that I'm very excited about this. So thank you.
Thank you. Before I come back to Councilor Moffitt, any further discussion? Councilor Moffitt again, please.
Sorry, just a couple follow-ups. We had talked some about smart code as being a potential for the city, potentially, and I'm kind of curious. We didn't really continue on with that conversation, so curious how that could affect this process, because a lot of the work that's done in these code projects when they're done by cities is every city tries to reinvent the wheel and come up with their own set of definitions and their own set of guidelines for everything. And so at the end of the process, then you end up trying to go through and like, oh geez, we're out of time. Let's go through and zone all the neighborhoods in the city so it fits our new code. And it just kind of seems like in a lot of processes, they end out of money, they run out of money, they run out of time because they're talking about definitions and conflicting things in their code because they have to write it to be different than somebody else. And so then you don't end up with enough time to implement the code and really apply it onto your neighborhoods. And so I guess I'm curious about the possibility of still implementing a smart code system through this, because then all of your definitions are done and you're literally just like changing numbers and things like that. Your graphics are done. They're clearly to use like examples and everything. It also brings some standardization to other communities. And so when you bring a developer in, there's a good chance that they've seen this code in other cities and things like that. And then the follow-up is the timeline. I'm concerned that we're not allowing enough time for this process, because once you have the code fully written, then you have to go through and apply those new zone districts to every parcel in the city. And I imagine that the best way to do this is to do essentially like a series of small area plans where you really go in and do neighborhood-based planning and look at the neighborhood. And that's what we talk about in the comprehensive plan, is wanting to do this neighborhood-based planning. And this is an opportunity to do that, but I don't think this timeline will allow that. So just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't have in-depth thoughts on it. I didn't research SRF too closely in this process because I did research them very closely in the comp plan process. But of course, that was something like 2 years ago now. And one of the reasons I like them is because of their experience with form-based and smart codes, and because they brought in outside consultants from organizations like the Congress of New Urbanism. As far as the timeline, I don't really know how to answer that. Except to say we're going to take as long as it takes. Now, if we have to employ the consultant longer than this timeline envisions in the contract, that could involve some change orders, but that's a policy decision as we move along. And so I think that's the best answer I can give. My assumption and the proposal is that this is enough time and money to write a new code for the city of Superior. If it turns out that we are interested in a much more elaborate process, then we'll have to amend the contract. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the contract, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 10.6, Finance Director Reinhardt recommends approval of a resolution providing for issuance and sale of general obligation promissory notes, Series 2024B of the City of Superior, Wisconsin.
Motion is by Councilor Dean, second by Councilor Johnson. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Reinhardt.
I did have Sean Lentz come up he's our debt consultant from ours, brought him up from Minneapolis to give a just kind of a brief presentation on debt and where the city's at with everything, if now you're not opposed. Sean's work.
Is there objection to that, to the presentation? Hearing none, please, Mr. Sean, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I'll keep it brief. It's very good news. I believe there was a sale day report that was provided to the council. We went out for bids on the sale of the originally $1,950,000 for financing for the fire truck. Based on the winning bid, that amount was able to be reduced down to $1,925,000 and still be able to fully fund the fire truck. The interest rates, and this is on the last page, or second to last page of the handout, came in quite a bit below our pre-sale report. We were looking at somewhere around 4.15% as a blended rate for the 15-year payback on the issue, and the winning bid was around 3.56%. So it was a really good result. The interest rates will be fixed over the whole 15 years, but from year 8 through year 15, if the council wanted to pay it off early, that would be at your option. The other item I wanted to mention to the council, and you'll see in the report, is we included an updating of the city's outstanding bond rating with Standard & Poor's. And I'm happy to report Nick was a big part of that discussion. I think the mayor sat in on that, I know as well, answered a number of questions, as did Jason. The report is very positive about the city. It's looking at general demographic issues in the city, the general economy in what's called the Duluth Superior area, and your local decisions and local financial management, all of which are very positive. The AA rating that you have is just 2 steps below the best rating. You have AAA, AA+, and then AA. And in general terms, what you have control over as a city and your staff, it's all very positive. Some of the items that would maybe get you to that AAA level are things that are out of your control, like just the general wealth of the folks living in the community, or just the size of your tax base. Now, if you were to quadruple the size, then you're maybe in where most of the communities that fall into the possible AAA status are. So again, that was a very good result. You've had this rating for quite some time, and it's above big assistance when we go out for financing. What we would recommend this evening is accepting the winning bid from Baird. They had the best bid out of the 6 bids that came in, and the action that would be needed of the council to accept that winning bid would be to accept and approve the resolution issuing the $1,925,000 in general obligation promissory notes. But if there's any questions from either the mayor or the council beforehand that I can answer, I'd be happy to do so.
Are there, because first, Baird is named in the resolution, right?
Yes, Baird
Yeah,
was the
yeah,
winning bid.
yeah,
Correct,
okay.
Mayor.
Question or discussion, Councilor Sweeney?
If this passes, when does the loan take place?
The closing on the loan is May 29th. The interest rates would be locked in as of today.
Okay.
But the closing, when the city would receive the funding, is at the end of May.
And when is the vehicle due to be paid?
You're talking about the timing of the...
My question is, let me refine that question. Is there much of a space between?
Yeah, I'll let Nick jump in maybe, but my understanding is you have to pay a payment up front and then another one in about 6 months and then another about 6 months after that, which would make up the entire amount of the payment on the truck.
So my question then is, when this passes, assuming it does, we're paying the whole thing up front? I mean, the interest starts at the day that, whenever this is, within the next period of time.
Yes, you would get the full amount of the proceeds of the loan, and you would be paying interest on the full amount of the proceeds of the loan right away. The good news is that you're borrowing at the 3.5, and investment rates are higher than that. Correct.
The bad news is we're paying it up front for part of it for a year.
You will be, but if, let's say, the interest rates you can invest at...
I just want to clarify that. That's all.
Yeah, you are correct. That's
thank
right.
you.
Yep.
Any other questions or discussion?
I'll discuss that point a little more quick. So we're borrowing at essentially 3.5% roughly. Projections on just holding that cash have come in, there's 3 different phases we pay this money, and it's like a year and a half. And then our final purchase, we've been projected at 5.5% to 5% interest earnings on that. So,
Any further discussion or questions? Motion then is to approve the resolution and award the winning bid. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you both.
Item 10.8, Council President, item 10.7, Finance Director Reinhardt recommends approval of a resolution reauthorizing self-insured program for workers' compensation.
Motion is by Councilor Grasky, second by Councilor Sweeney. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 10.8, Council President Grasky and Vice President Ludwig recommends approval of the 2024 to 2025 council appointments.
Motion is by Councilor Grasky, second by Councilor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. And then, councilors, for my appointments, they're almost all done. I got the vast majority of them. I had some last-minute changes where some folks that I was going to appoint and wasn't able to. And to change this, I have a mistake that I need to correct. So I just would look for a motion to approve all of the committee appointments except the Urban Forestry Tree Board. I'll bring that and a few others to the next meeting. Is there a motion to approve everything but Urban Forestry Tree Board? The motion is by Councilor Grasky, second by Councilor Herrick. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. The motion carries. I don't believe we have business by public, right? Councilor Ludwig?
I would like to, yes. And this is about our citywide composting program. And you may or may not know that this week is designated as International Compost Awareness Week. And to go along with that International Compost Awareness Week, our citywide food waste composting program is now up and running. So, and I believe a notice to that effect was went out to the release to the press yesterday, and I believe there will be an article in Friday's Superior Telegram about this. And so, in case some of you have not seen the news yet, we have 6 drop-off locations. In Northwest Community Service Agency on the north end, that's where our Solid Rock the gardening site is. Barker's Island Public Boat Launch, Moon's Foot Boat Landing Launch, Bear Creek Park, Bethel Lutheran Church in South End, and Billings Park Maintenance Garage over in Billings Park. The waste has to be put in BPI-approved bags, which the city is supplying to our residents. And I believe the BPI bags are all available at these 6 drop-off sites and also available in our Public Works office here in the Government Center, Superior Public Library, our Environmental Services Division, and our Superior Landfill. I want to thank the ESD staff, Ida Sampson, Darian McNamara, Megan Hoagfelt, our Public Works Director, Todd Janigo, for the work they put into getting the composting program organized and operational. And I want to also thank Linda Cadot, our Parks Rec and Forestry Director, for her welcome suggestions about where to place some of the compost site locations. And last and not least, I want to thank our Public Works Committee members, especially Councilor Van Sickle, Councilor Ledeen, and Councilor Elm, for their input and approval for the composting program, and also you City Council members also for supporting this. So I'm very excited, and I hope our council is and our residents are also. And the end result is, our waste will go over to WLSSD, and they make a wonderful composting product. And so I have used it both at home personally and in our community garden. And so, so it's a wonderful product too that I hope that our residents will also get from WLSSD and improve their yards and gardens. So thank you.
Lest it go unnoticed, let me thank you, Councilor, for introducing and shepherding this policy for a very long time to completion. It's nice to finally catch up that compostable food waste is a very large and unnecessary part of our landfill, and we get to start turning that around now. And I did see it covered on the morning news yesterday, which is good because good composters are also early risers. So, any further business by public? Hearing none, we have no further business and are adjourned. Thank you.